I tried beating Terraria using the Remastered Thrower class. This is a mod that introduces a bunch of new thrower related weapons, armor, and accessories to revive a long forgotten set of abilities. Will I be able to properly throw hands with Mr. Squid God, or will I quit and never play Terraria ever again? Well, let's find out. I started off by opening up my starter bag, and the very kind mod developers actually gave me 98 throwing knives, which I could use as starting weapons. I browsed a bunch of crafting recipes to see what was in store for us, and after that, I went to chop down trees. I ventured over to the left side of the world and went into an ice cave searching for ore, and once I made it to the corruption, I chucked some bombs at the demon orbs in order for a meteorite to drop in. I made my way over to the surface, got myself some cactus, got myself some sand, and upon coming back to spawn, I chopped down more trees and started mining myself a elevator. Knowing that my normal throwing knives are probably gonna run out soon, I experimented and crafted myself 99 cactus knives just so we could have it as backup, but I will later come to find that these are actually pretty good and dealt some decent damage. Like, I mean, the prickly parts of the cactus are not just there for show, boyos. Anyways, I continued digging my elevator in search for more ore and some life crystals, and while digging the elevator, I managed to fall into this white granite biome, killed myself a hoplite, and got myself some javelins. These actually come useful in later crafting recipes, so I'm gonna hold on to them and hope that I can get myself even more. Upon coming back to spawn, I made myself a furnace, built a bunch of NPC houses, and went on the hunt for more weapons. I stumbled upon a enchanted boomerang, which actually counts as a thrower weapon in this version of Terraria, so I was using that for a while, and at spawn I also crafted myself a full set of amethyst armor, which increased our thrower damage and velocity. And after this, I built myself an arena for the Eye of Cthulhu. I went over to the right side of the world and using my golden pickaxe, picked up the meteor. As I came back to spawn, I crafted myself some chains, and using the chains in conjunction with the meteorite, I crafted myself some meteorite javelins and then some ice spears. This we were going to use in fighting the Eye of Cthulhu, and I was very blown away by these thrower weapons. The meteorite javelin and the ice spear were actually kind of garbage, especially the meteorite javelin. For something that is made out of meteorite, I thought it would do more damage, but no, it was really bad, and so I just instead opted to use the throwing axe and various other weapons that I had in my inventory to eventually take out the Eye of Cthulhu. And once we took that out, it actually managed to drop a weapon called the Gazer. This was super overpowered, and actually upon hitting an enemy, it would completely stun them, making it so they could barely move, which makes this weapon particularly very useful in boss fights. Anyways, after this, I stocked up on Shurikens and went down into the caverns. I went mining, got myself some life crystals, and made my way down all the way to the underworld. Once I came back to spawn, I bought myself a bunch of bombs, crafted myself an arena platform builder, and made my way over to fight the Eater of Worlds. I built an arena, chucked some bombs at the orbs, and summoned in the Eater of Worlds. This boss was stupidly easy using the Gazer, which we got from the Eye of Cthulhu, and along with this, the meteorite javelin also did some pretty decent damage to the boss. Once we took that out, I came back to spawn and crafted myself the Watcher Glove. This summoned in a bunch of little Brain of Cthulhu orbs around me, which dealt a fairly decent amount of damage to all the mobs that got in our way. Along with this, I crafted myself a Nightmare Pickaxe, and using the Nightmare Pickaxe, I went down to the caverns to pick up obsidian, as well as later dig up Hellstone. Upon coming back to spawn, we were actually invaded by goblins, so I had to take out the entire goblin invasion. This was extremely annoying, but once we took them all out, I made myself a loom, crafted myself a bunch of silk, and using this in conjunction with Hellstone, I crafted myself a full set of fused armor. This was the best thrower armor that we could get before fighting the Wall of Flesh, so I equipped it and went over to the jungle in order to get myself some stingers and some jungle spores. There's a lot of thrower weapons that we need to craft in order to get the best of the best weapons before fighting the bosses, so I'm gonna gear up as much as possible because you guys know how good I am at the game. While in the jungle, I found myself the Hive of Queen Bee, so I built a tiny arena there and summoned her in. Using the Gazer, we absolutely demolished this boss, and upon taking her out, we actually got some bee nades, which gave me a wonderful insight. Bee nades are actually a thrower weapon, so we can stack up on them and then absolutely demolish the Wall of Flesh. At spawn, using all the resources from the jungle, I crafted myself the Javelin, which was a bee javelin, and along with this, I crafted myself myself a bunch of Hellstone Shurikens. I made myself a Cloud Glove accessory and then proceeded to go over to Skeletron's dungeon, build an arena, and summon him in. Using the Javelin and the Hellstone Shurikens, we took him out without a problem whatsoever, and then I proceeded to enter into his dungeon. Along with this, Skeletron also actually managed to drop bone knives, which were super overpowered, and I don't know how these are even balanced in the game. Like, honestly, this was better than Hellstone Shurikens, and you could quite literally get them before getting Hellstone. So, mod developers, fix your stuff. Regardless of this, I picked up as many water candles as I could, opened up a bunch of chests, and upon coming back to spawn, I crafted myself the Dim Mace, which was essentially the upgraded Knight's Edge version of the Gazer. This, of course, was very powerful and inching us one step closer to proper hard mode weapons. I went back over to Skeletron's dungeon, grinded out a ton of bones, opened up a bunch of chests, and once I got enough water candles and bones, I came back to spawn and once more fought the Eye of Cthulhu. With our newfound power, we absolutely destroyed this boss, and then we fought it again just because why not? Combining a bunch of resources that I previously had gathered together, I made myself the Combined Scythe. This required almost every single important material from pre-hard mode to craft, and rightfully so, it was very overpowered. It could go through walls and was essentially the baby version of a death sickle. At spawn, I built myself more NPC houses, killed the queen bee a couple more times in order to get myself more bee wax and bee nades, crafted more bee nades, and I went down to the underworld to build an arena for the Wall of Flesh. No hesitation whatsoever, as soon as I found a guide voodoo demon, I killed it, picked it up. I didn't even go to buy any buffs at spawn because we were already so overpowered, and I chucked the guide voodoo doll into the lava. This, of course, summoned in the Wall of Flesh, and the first thing I did was spam the hungry with all of the bee nades that I had in my inventory. We dealt tons of damage to the Wall of Flesh, and I finished it off using the bone knife. The ancient spirits of light and dark have been released. Do you know what else gets released? That is right, Boio's anger whenever you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Mwah. As soon as we got into hard mode, the first thing I did was went over to the corruption and started breaking demon altars. We blessed our world with palladium, orichalcum, and titanium, and once I came back to spawn, I started the everlasting pickaxe progression. I first crafted myself a molten pickaxe. Why? Because I completely forgot to craft one before. After this, I went down to mine palladium so we could come back to spawn and craft a palladium pickaxe. Using the palladium pickaxe, I made myself an orichalcum anvil, made myself an orichalcum pickaxe, and now we can finally start getting big boy titanium. After getting a bunch of titanium, I came back to spawn, crafted it all into bars, and then I proceeded to make myself a titanium kabuto. Along with this, I made myself a titanium javelin and got confused because I didn't know how to get the rest of the titanium armor. What I forgot to realize is that hard mode armors just differ in headpieces, and all I had to do was craft a titanium chestplate and titanium leggings to complete the armor set. So once my brain gained 2 more IQ, I crafted myself full titanium armor and now went on the infinite journey to craft myself the Boio Mod javelin, which required us to get almost every single pre-hard mode spear and combine it into one using Souls of Light. Before this, I crafted myself a bunch of potion hearts, which essentially just makes infinite versions of potions so you can get buffs and don't constantly have to buy potions every time you want to fight a boss. I combined them to make a couple hearts of the warrior, which we're gonna later combine once we get even better materials into one accessory, and after this I went to the ocean to gather starfish, seashells, and coral in order to craft myself this one ocean spear. Upon making that, I needed to make myself a diamond javelin, which required me to get regular javelins and combine them with diamonds, stone, and jungle spores. So of course I did that, and now the only thing left for us was to get Souls of Light and harpy feathers. I went over to the Sky Islands to get myself some harpy feathers, and in addition to this, I managed to get myself a giant harpy feather as well as Souls of Light. So upon coming back to spawn, I crafted myself a pair of harpy wings, and then I went down to the jungle to get myself a couple of vines. We also needed these for the crafting recipe, so I couldn't just ignore them. After I got myself the vines, which might I add took me forever, I came back to spawn, went down to the underground hallowed, and got myself the required Souls of Light to craft myself the spear. I also got myself a batarang during this time after killing a cave bat, which was pretty sick because I really really wasn't expecting this to be a weapon, but yeah, it didn't really do too much damage, it was just really fun to use. This is obviously not a reference to anything, by the way. I came back to spawn, combined all of the staffs, and crafted myself the Boio Mod spear. This was the best spear that we can get before fighting the mech bosses, so we're pretty much geared up, and now the only thing left is to actually get the summons for all the bosses. I went down to the underground corruption biome and started farming out souls of night. The Boio Mod spear came in handy for this, but the best weapon to do this with was the combined scythe, as I could just stand behind the protection of my walls and destroy every enemy that couldn't reach me. As I came back to spawn, I crafted myself the summons for the Destroyer, Skeletron Prime, and the twins, and then waited for it to turn to nighttime. Once it turned to nighttime, I first summoned in the Destroyer, and the Boio Mod spear was my go-to weapon. Every single time I stuck the Destroyer with it, it would constantly be dealing damage to it, and it kind of looked like carrots all over a worm, so that was pretty funny. This boss fight took forever, and with all the weapons in our arsenal, even the combined scythe, which is a piercing weapon, we still took an absurd amount of time to destroy this boss. But we did manage to take it out, and once the Destroyer was defeated, I crafted myself a weapon called the Ravager. This essentially shot out a projectile that quite literally shot out heads of the Destroyer that would fire projectiles. After this, I summoned in the twins, and using this weapon, we absolutely demolished them. I mean, it wasn't even a challenge. And after the twins were defeated, I summoned in Skeletron Prime. Using the Boio Mod spear, we managed to take Skeletron Prime out as well, making the jungle grow restless, meaning we can now go and fight the salad boss. I crafted myself the pickaxe axe, and I went straight over to the jungle. I mined up a bunch of chlorophyte, and upon coming back to spawn, I crafted myself the chlorophyte knife, which was essentially a miniature homing throwable chlorophyte sword. It was very overpowered and locked onto any mob in essentially like a 200-meter radius. I went down to the underground glowing mushroom biome, picked up myself a couple of seeds, placed them down on the surface, and made myself an artificial glowing mushroom biome so the truffle could spawn in. I went over to the jungle to farm for the Uzi, and once we got all the materials, I came all the way back to spawn, and I crafted myself the biological weapon. This was an upgrade to that destroyer throwing weapon that we previously had, and was even more overpowered. I went back over to the jungle, located Plantera's bulb, dug out a mini arena once I actually found it, and I summoned her in. Using the chlorophyte knife, in conjunction with the biological weapon, we absolutely destroyed Plantera. After defeating Plantera, I went straight into Golem's temple, traversed my way around the area, and picked up myself a couple of lizard power cells, as well as solar tablets and solar fragments. I made an arena where we could summon him, and then I came back to spawn. As soon as I came back to spawn, I realized it was daytime, so I summoned in the solar eclipse and got straight to work. We needed to get ourselves a broken hero dagger, which we can get by killing Mothrons. This we can use to combine with the hallowed and the knight's edge knives in order to craft essentially the Terrorblade version of the knife. I grinded out the solar eclipse, and upon combining the knight's edge knife and the Excalibur knife with the broken hero swords, I crafted myself the Terra knife, and then after this I combined the two maces, making myself a Terra mace, and then I went over to Golem's temple and summoned him in. Using the Terra mace and the Terra knife, we literally destroyed this boss with no trouble whatsoever, a couple of times might I add, and I also managed to get myself the possessed hatchet, which also apparently is a thrower weapon within this version of Terraria, so we are free to use that. Upon killing Golem, we actually got ourselves some lizard bars, so once I came back to spawn, I crafted myself the temple knife and fought the solar eclipse once more to get more broken hero daggers. Upon getting all the resources and the solar eclipse ending, I combined the Terra mace and the Terra dagger to make myself the coalescence. This was essentially the ultimate thrower weapon. There was nothing better than this, and it had two various modes of attack, a left click that would shoot a flail and a right click that would throw a bunch of knives. This dealt a bunch of damage, and after this I crafted myself full temple armor, and then I proceeded to craft myself the fungal tillery, which was an upgrade to the biological weapon. After this, I went straight over to Skeletron's dungeon and summoned in the lunatic cultist. I honestly thought the fungal tillery was going to be far better than what it actually provided me with, and so I decided to just stick to the coalescence and then later the possessed hatchet to take out the lunatic cultist. Once the lunatic cultist was defeated, I started making my way over to all of the pillars, but I decided to first challenge the vortex pillar, as we could combine some of its resources with the resources of the solar pillar to actually craft a thrower class fragment that we could craft very special void axes with. I took out the vortex pillar, then went over to fight the solar pillar. I went over to fight Golem a couple more times in order to get myself more beetle husks so we can craft the final armor of the thrower class, which was called the ultimate armor. This required us to get every single piece of pre-hard mode armor, and upon combining all of them with beetle husks, we crafted ourselves a full set of ultimate armor, making us truly ready for Moonlord. I went back over to take out the solar pillar, but gave up halfway because I knew it wasn't gonna go out whatsoever. I decided to take out the nebula pillar first, and after this I came back to the solar pillar. We died countless times, but once I took out its shield, I took out the solar pillar, and upon coming back to spawn, I crafted myself a bunch of void axes as well as the daybreak. These weapons are going to be extremely handy when it comes to taking out Moonlord, as they deal loads of thrower damage. After this, I went over to the Stardust pillar, took out its shield, and once we took out the Stardust pillar, our screen started shaking, signifying that Moonlord was about to spawn in. I came all the way back to spawn, stood under my little tiny mud hut, and waited for Squid God to appear. As soon as he spawned in, I spammed my void axe on him, and once he shot out his laser, I used the temple knife to deal damage to his eye. I kept on spamming him with the void axe as that throwable dealt tons of damage, and it created like this weird void cloud that would keep on dealing constant damage to all of his arms, all of his eyeballs. And so we took out both of his arms, we took out his main eyeball, leaving us with the core exposed. Using the coalescence, we started spamming his core, and eventually we took it out with the void axe. Be sure to check out another video like this on the screen. Consider subscribing to the channel if you're new. Drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it. This has been Boio. Peace out.